it to him, and he's on his way in right now.
Okay, great.
And I'll keep my phone open in case anybody else texts. I have two members of the public in my house sitting in on the meeting. One has four legs.
Yeah, so I have Bill Danielson, Chris, Krista, and Nancy who are in attendance.
Okay.
I tried promoting Chris, but she rejected my promotion the first time, so I don't think she wants to be on video. Oh, there she is. I guess she
Hello,
did
Chris.
accept it.
Yeah.
And I don't see
Ralph yet?
Ralph. Do we know if Mark was going to be?
Mark had said he might not be able to make it, so I'm guessing
Okay.
he won't be here. And I know Josh wasn't able to.
Okay.
Um,
So it is live on YouTube. So whenever you're ready, I can
yeah,
shoot Mitch a quick email.
yeah. That's Mitch.
Nope, still don't see anyone else joining in. Bob, you're muted. If you're talking to us, Bob, you're still muted. We can't hear you.
The catchphrase of the
I am not.
2020s, you're muted.
Okay, for the benefit of the folks on Zoom, I am talking to Mitch. So when you see my lips moving, I'm trying to help Mitch get in. So I'm going to mute myself on Zoom.
I don't miss these days of Zoom meetings.
I don't either. We're still doing the Historical Society by Zoom because we have so many people away off island, and that's something that's been a good thing for us.
All right, Ralph just popped on.
Yeah.
Connected. That's great.
Where's the volume?
All right, I'm back. Mitch is on his way in. Ralph is here. So let's go ahead and get started. Apologies to all you folks out there in the public who are listening. We had a few Zoom issues getting started here. Let's go ahead and open the meeting. It's 8:53 a.m. And just as a kickoff, this is an informational meeting to just check in with the select board, Vika, our emergency coordinator, and a few other interested parties. Coastal Waters, I think, may be on here eventually, on where we are with reporting to the various emergency management authorities. Specifically, you'll hear us refer to EMA, which refers, in our case, to Cumberland County's Emergency Management Agency, MEMA, which is the main emergency management agency, and FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And the general situation is that EMA and MEMA are currently collecting information to determine, in our case, whether Cumberland County meets the threshold at which FEMA would begin to jump in, offer assistance, and possibly financial assistance. And we had a deadline of Monday for reporting to EMA and MEMA initial estimates, very rough numbers. And then hopefully we'll get a visit later on this week from FEMA, and they'll be looking for information a lot more specific and a lot more documented. So with that as a kickoff, Vika, could you just give us a quick rundown on what you've been up to and where things are right now?
Yeah. So the last week or so, there's been a number of instances where we had gone out and gone to 13 different locations is what it ended up being, I believe. And so Ralph and Chuck and seeking assistance from Bo Bepre, we went around to all the different locations and we assessed what was damaged and what quantity of gravel and riprap or loam would it take to replace what had been taken by the storms. Most of these locations are the town's right of way to shore access. So Fenderson, Waldo Point, Willow Street, all the different locations that people use to access the beach. And so the reporting, because of these storms being so close back to back, it was kind of difficult to determine which storm did which damage. And so basically the way I split it up in the reporting is any information that we had firsthand kind of went to the first submissions, and then anything that was left over went to the second, in hopes that they'll really be able to combine both of these storms into one. I shared the spreadsheet with the board yesterday afternoon that kind of gave a breakdown of each location. The ticket number is the number that once it was submitted was provided by EMA, and that ticket number, the date, 24 is the year, and then the month, and then the day and the time it was submitted. So that's how they generate those numbers. So based off of that, you'll know which day was what was submitted. And so roughly about a little over 1.7 million in damages is what was submitted on the behalf of the town. 1.5 of that are the two large numbers from East Shore Drive and South Shore Drive. Those numbers were used from the rough estimate that was provided to us last year by Barney Baker when we had the December of 2023 storm. And so, while we did put some estimates for East Shore Drive to replace what was damaged, we also put those numbers in because that damage is now within the town right-of-way access. And so that was all submitted, shared with the board. Maya was nice enough to spend a good chunk of the day with me yesterday. And we worked together on providing a folder for each location where we put in any before pictures, after pictures, the initial submission. And so if you're looking in those folders and you see that the numbers don't match up to what is in the Excel document, it's because those were the initial numbers, and then I had to go back and correct them. And when the corrections were made, they didn't, send me another email. So those are in there specifically for the ticket number to have something coordinated to. And so now they have all of the information. I emailed Margaret Cushing this morning at about 5:30 because I still hadn't heard back about when they're anticipating to come. And so she emailed me back right away and said that they're hoping to have some time this afternoon. So we might get something for them to come tomorrow. That's the hope. We're not sure. And so as soon as I find out something, I will let the board know. But that's kind of where things stand right now.
All right. Thanks, Vika. Ralph, anything that you would add as emergency management? Your official title in this case is Emergency Management Coordinator. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Vika covered everything that we did. I'd just like to say thank you to the EMA office. They have been and continue to be very helpful and easy to work with.
All right. Thanks. Any questions from the board on that set of comments from Vika? Carol?
Just wondering who will be attending the FEMA visit.
So I know Vika will be there. I know I will be there. I would hope that Ralph can be there if it fits his work schedule. It would be great if we could also get somebody from Coastal Waters on board. I think it's kind of hard to pin down who exactly can be there until we know specifically when they're coming. But if it was sometime Thursday, Ralph, are you on island Thursday or off?
No, I'm working in Portland tomorrow.
Okay. All right. Is there anyone else in your department's public safety on the island who might be able to join us, do you think? You went silent, Ralph. I think you're muted.
The only problem is that nobody's had anything to do with the EMA side of it. So
Yeah.
it would be kind of a.
Yep. Yeah, they might learn something. They might not have a whole lot to offer, but that's something we can consider. Does that answer your question, Carol? Okay. Other questions, David? Anything?
I'm just curious how we handle questions from residents.
Right. I don't think that a FEMA visit, correct me if I'm wrong, Ralph and Vika, I don't think they are intended to be public facing. I believe they're more focused on civic officials. I'm getting nods on that.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. So fielding questions, the best way to handle that would be to funnel them through the town office. Email is always best. And Vika, I'm going to throw you to the wolves and say email to the town administrator, and Vika can then delegate and assign answers and tasks from there. Does that make sense, Vika?
Yeah. And if you do get any specific questions about any business damage, personal damage, we do have on the town website where we've been putting any information that kind of comes through the town. We're putting it on there. So, the letter that we sent out on the behalf of the town, any information for individuals or businesses, you can kind of, siphon them to that direction too. That location might help answer some of the questions for them.
Okay. And Ralph, you had your hand up?
I was just going to say, point them towards the website.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. All right. Anything else from the board on that topic? Okay. So looking forward, assuming we get a visit from FEMA, we will get feedback from them. I would say the next step after that will be when FEMA and Cumberland Emergency Management and Maine Emergency Management come to agreement on whether Cumberland County meets the threshold for federal involvement or not. And the work then, to some degree, just gets started in terms of data gathering, information engineering, those level of detail specifics that would be required to participate in any sort of federal assistance, we assume. So I think that's it. Is anyone from Vika, can you tell if anyone from Coastal Waters is on the call?
Herb is in attendance, yes.
Are you able to promote him to panelist easily?
I sure can.
Okay.
It'll just take a second.
Herb's kind of slow. Good morning, Herb. Thank you for joining us.
Before Herb steps in and makes a comment, I do just want to kind of remind and make sure we don't forget to have Maya have the opportunity to share the map of all the different locations.
Yep.
It might be helpful for us to see that.
Yes, thank you for that reminder, Vika. Would have slipped past my feeble early morning brain. Herb, could you offer any insights that Coastal Waters can share relative to infrastructure, public infrastructure, or anything else, business related, personal related? But I'm guessing you're the CWC representative to this call. So anything you can share with us?
Just that we submitted a written report. We found we did two sort of systematic walkarounds independently. The harbor master did one, and I did one. Also, our chairman Justin Dowdy put out a request for anybody to keep their eyes open and let us know if they saw anything. Because our infrastructure is kind of in the lee of an eastern wind, and that's what we had. We had very little damage, so we were very fortunate that way. There was extra wear and tear in a few places, and that's basically what we reported to Vika. Nothing surprising from that standpoint. The worst hit was probably Cousins, but not so much the float or the pilings, the ramp, which we're responsible for. The anchors and moorings all seem to stay in place for that. The wharf took a hit, as most of you know, but that's really Yarmouth's purview. We do have an interest in that we pay 80% of the annual cost of a reserve account to maintain that. So we should pay attention to it, but we're not directly responsible for anything there. So all in all, we, from a coastal waters infrastructure standpoint, we look at, in our maintenance plan, we look at 16 floats and 5 ramps and the boat ramps, and mostly the boat ramp at Stone Wharf. And we saw really a little extra wear and tear, but very little what we would call storm damage or safety concerns.
All right. David. Thanks, Herb.
Just wondering if Yarmouth is expected or plans to ask us for assistance in repairs to the wharf, given our interest in it.
Yeah, I can give a report on that. We sort of did a divide and conquer approach to gathering early information on the various water-oriented public infrastructure pieces. Carol focused on the Stone Wharf. I talked with Yarmouth regarding Cousins. Vika did everything else. The situation at Cousins with the pier exists on a couple different levels. So as Herb mentioned, the ramp and the float is all on us. That looked okay. The pier is Yarmouth's, although we're a financial participant. And there was some damage that got repaired quickly. And then there was some other longer term skin damage, we'll call it. There was a piece of plywood inside the shed, for example, that came loose. A few things like that that are being dealt with as quickly as possible. The pier at Yarmouth was currently, before the storms happened, in the early phases of an engineering review by a firm selected by Yarmouth with input from us as members of the Joint Standing Committee. And that engineering study was based on looking at where that pier is in its life cycle. The engineering study is also contemplating some improvements to both the pier and the float that would enhance functionality for both Yarmouth and for Shebig, and by way of Shebig CTC. So that engineering study obviously got put on hold when this storm happened, because that engineering firm, like everybody else, is knee deep in storm stuff right now. But there's that level of baseline information was out there before this storm hit, and that'll play to our advantage as we continue to look, as Yarmouth continues to look at that pier. Short term, after we spoke with them, they immediately sent engineering people down to take a look at the pier, and more for our benefit than theirs, really, at this time of year. But they came back with a quick engineering review that, from this level of specificity that we're engaged in with EMA and MEMA right now, the structure appears sound, with the exception of those few boards kind of issues that are being dealt with. So that's where the Yarmouth Pier is right now, David.
Okay, thank you.
And then following up on what Herb said, I will add that outside of the coastal waters environment, in terms of what things that they were looking at, Carol has been involved in the Stone Pier. I'll just summarize quickly and say, longer term, we're engaging help to look at any hidden damage that may have occurred to the Stone Pier by way of stability. But then at a different level, and I'll call it on the surface because that's really what we're talking about, the pavement at the Stone Pier, which has seen some undulations and cracking over the last several years. These overtopping events, combined with freezing and thaw situations, wintertime temperature situations, has led to a fairly rapid degradation of the pavement. So one of the pieces of cost and repair that we have submitted includes a quote from our paving partner, the paving company with whom we've worked on a long-term basis on the island. And they were good enough to quickly give us a quote on what it would take to repair that paving situation on the Stone Pier. Separate from that, one item I would mention as an example, in the private situation, the boatyard experienced some damage at what I would call the run-up to their pier. And I did not ask Paul's permission to talk about this. I'm hoping he's okay with this, but they went to work immediately repairing that apron, if you will, that approaches the pier. And I'm only mentioning that because it's a good example of how what is private in these conversations with EMA and FEMA does have a dramatic impact on the community. This one in particular, because as you all know, the boatyards are our only place to get gasoline, our primary place to get fuel oil. And those are items of critical importance to the public. So yes, it's a private situation, and they are, I know, following up with the various agencies on help getting their longer term repairs in place and dealing with what might happen next. But there is that delineation with EMA and FEMA between business versus personal versus civic. This call's focused on the civic, but as Ralph and Vika have both mentioned, the website does provide links for people to explore their personal situation or their business situation with this emergency. So I'm going to shut up now and ask
Big Island, and they wanted me to sit in. So can I call you back?
Mitch, you're not muted.
I just muted him.
Thank you. So Maya, could you take a moment to share your map your GIS map that you prepared?
Yeah, I can share my screen. Let's see. Oh, Vika, I think the participant screen sharing is disabled.
I'm making you a co-host, Maya, so I think you should be able to have all of the abilities once that is done.
Perfect, thank you.
For those of you on the call who don't know, Maya is our new climate resiliency fellow from GPCOG, and she just started working last week. And so she's in the thick of it and has already been pretty helpful. So she will be working with us through September, and you'll be seeing her around.
Thank you for that, Carol. I should have introduced Maya in a more organized fashion. So welcome, Maya, and thank you for your work.
Thank you. Yeah, I should have introduced myself a little bit more fully, but I'm really excited to be here.
Right in the thick of it.
Yeah, just in time for the storms. Okay.
So for the public, what Maya is going to share is a GIS map of the different locations that are on our reporting to EMA, MEMA, and hopefully FEMA.
Yeah, so this is not like a like formatted exportable map, but Carol and I thought it would be best to show in this format so that we can zoom in more fully into different locations, and it won't get pixelated. So I can is there any specific location that I should go to first? The yellow boxes are the storm damage sites, and the ones that are bold are the higher priority sites.
Well, select one of the higher priority sites and take a look. Stone Pier, Coleman, one of those. Yep.
Yeah,
Stone Pier.
Oh, it's gonna take a sec.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. So see that my box is not quite big enough, but this is the Stone Wharf site. Maybe let's see, maybe I'll go to one of the, I don't know if this is a site where, like yesterday Vika and I were looking at some sites where the imagery that's in ArcMap is shows a coastline that's significantly wider than it is now. I can go to the East Shore Drive.
Okay.
What Maya did yesterday is she went through and she took a screenshot up close of all the locations. So not only do we have personal photos of before and afters, but we have some images like this to show of the before photos.
Yeah, so also the thin blue line around the edge of the island is the highest astronomical tide line. And then this orange, there's a few patches of it around the map. It's hard to see when it's zoomed out, but that's dunes according to the state database.
Yeah, and I would just add dunes is both a term that we all use when we're describing a sandy area on the beach, but it's also a scientific and legal term that we'll all come to know more about in the weeks and years ahead. Dunes have protection under state law and federal law that we'll be paying more and more attention to over time.
If I can jump in, because I don't know if you can see my hand, but
Sorry,
so Maya, what is the date of this imagery? Do you know?
I don't know. This is the base map on ArcMap. I can see the dates if I go into Google Earth Engine, but I can pull that up if that would be better.
Yeah, I was just curious, but what I think this shows is that we've seen significant erosion since the date of this aerial image to where we are right now. because I think sort of midway on the road is where, before it turns, is where we're having the most significant erosion. Is that right? Maya, could you zoom in a little bit more?
So if you look at the houses directly across the street from the, you know, the house that's at the top, that's where you're going to see the erosion that's extremely close to the road right now. So to put it a little bit in perspective, it's going to be kind of right around in that area where it's right up against the road at the moment.
So Maya, can you slide your cursor over there? There's sort of a gray spot next to the road itself. I think it's actually, so keep going up, right down a little bit on your,
Yep.
Up
just a little bit, and it's right around
left.
there.
So go west, left. Yeah, so right in that area. Yep, that's it. So right now, that's right against the roadbed, right?
It's within, I would say, within a foot of foot and a half of the actual road. And so what we the other day when we were down there, what we actually did is we measured the width of the road. I haven't had a chance to look to see what the town right away of that is, but based on the measurements, it would definitely be assumed that it is now within the town right of way that the damage is impeding on.
So one quick note, update for the select board. I did reach out to Rick Harbison at GPCOG, Greater Portland Council of Governments. Rick has been instrumental in the past in helping us. He runs for GPCOG a drone survey program that uses ortho imagery shot from a drone for extremely accurate mapping from the air of the same place over time, or I should say mapping at a snapshot in time that can then be overlaid onto publicly available GIS data, such as what we're looking at right now. And Rick is talking to his boss to see how to get funding to take ortho imagery of, in one day he could do maybe three, maybe four, but probably three of these areas, at which point we could produce a before and after sort of comparison that was very specific in nature, not unlike what we did. Some of you will have seen the slider images of the hook from a before and after standpoint from a few years ago. So hopefully we'll have that kind of detailed comparison in the near future.
So
And I just suggested that Maya move just to the South Shore Road site.
Yeah.
So those are the three big ticket items.
Yeah.
yeah, this is
South
the,
Shore.
South Shore Drive.
Yep.
Site. Should I like would it be helpful for me to pull up because some of the pictures that we were looking at yesterday, or do you want to talk about what you've observed in this area?
So in this area, most of the damage, well, the whole area has experienced significant erosion, but the biggest significant concern that we have is to the left where you see the cluster of the three houses real close together towards the bottom, right across from the house that's on the bottom, the white house closest to the road, right about across the street from there. That's where the erosion is really dramatic. And this is the area that last December of 2023 storm, we had the erosion there. And so we have really great photos of the damage from last year, but then how much more the damage has happened in this year. And so Maya, do you have access to the folder right now? We can just quickly pull up for South Shore Drive folder and what we have for a couple of pictures of the after.
Yeah, I can pull that up. I'll stop. Oh, actually, well, let's see. I think if I navigate to a new tab, you guys will keep seeing the map.
So while Maya's doing that, I'll just point out for the benefit of the public, what's happening at South Shore Drive and East Shore Drive is that the erosion of the bank, and in those two locations, it's primarily bank that we're talking about as opposed to dune. The erosion of the bank is such that the actual road bed that we drive on is threatened. In a few places, the erosion actually touches the roadbed. And obviously the danger there is that if you're driving close to the edge of the road, collapse could occur. So Public Works is taking steps to, on a more hardened basis, put some sort of guardrail, I'm using that term loosely, but guardrail up to encourage people to stay toward the center or the upland side of the road as a short-term safety measure. And then longer term, obviously, we've got a lot of work to do to figure out all of the engineering behind what would be required to shore up those roads so that they were not in danger of any sort of accidental collapse or any sort of accidental driving off of the road. And as many of you may have heard, there are several different levels of response to these situations. I'll summarize by saying you can try to fix what's there. You can try to adapt in some fashion, which might mean adding elevation, or you can actually retreat, which would mean, for example, putting the road in a different place. That's a very overly simplified version of some of those options that are out there that we'll need to be considering as we look down the road. Go ahead, Maya.
Can everyone see my OneDrive screen? Okay, perfect.
Yep.
So here's the before photos that I have. Hopefully they'll load. Okay, great. So this is the screenshot that I took on Google Earth. But this is some of the damage from last year. So this picture and this photo show some of the pre-existing damage from storms last year. And then here's some of the after photos. So yeah, there's really significant damage along the shore there. Those are all the pictures that I have in that photo, in that album, for South Shore Drive, but I'm happy to go to another site if that would be helpful.
I would be interested in seeing East Shore Drive, just the photos for that.
Here's the before, that's just a screenshot. And then this is the photo that we have for the before photos, and then for after.
I would add that second before photo was after the erosion had begun, but certainly before this last range of storms.
Wow.
Yeah, so the before photo is last year what we showed to FEMA from that damage, and the after photos are the photos from this damage.
Yeah. And what's really interesting about East Shore in particular is that it's an area that I at least have always thought of as a rocky shoreline. It's ledge, but the combination of sea level rise and the severity of the storms have led to erosion of the bank up above the ledge. And that's what's causing us the problem. The ledge is no longer sufficient to protect us there.
And I think what will be an interesting question for FEMA is, since we have the documented photos from the last storm damage, are they only going to allow us to sort of, account for the repair between that last storm and this storm? In other words, the disaster declaration will be for the January 24 storms. And so they may only sort of, I don't know how to explain this, but allow us to restore back to the 23 storm, or 22 storm level, which is of course kind of ludicrous, but I think that's the way the system works. So when you talk to them, it would be good to understand that. Because
and that,
yeah,
oh,
that's it.
That's Carol, you're absolutely right. And that's something that when EMA came out the other day with us, they were very specific about that their requirements and what FEMA is going to ask. FEMA is going to be very stringent. And that's something that, with when Bo was helping us, he was getting a little frustrated because it was, what I kept on reiterating to him is you have to think about what did the ocean take away in this exact footprint? Not necessarily what would take to repair to make it how it was, but then also safe. And so, we're the cost of the repair and what was to go back into that necessarily isn't going to be the most efficient way to rebuild. But one of the things that they suggested too is FEMA will work with you in providing you what was taken away essentially and what would be to put it back to how it was before. But then there are many grant opportunities through locations that we can go after where it would be then appealing for FEMA to support us in, because we would be doing something to show how we can stabilize all of these areas. For example, East Shore Drive, putting something there. So then that way FEMA isn't coming back and giving money for everything is being damaged. They're seeing us as trying to do something that is going to prevent from further damage happening. So those are kind of the conversations that will take place in line. And the biggest suggestion that they had was that when all this starts happening, which the assumption is that Cumberland County will exceed over that $2.4 million and change threshold that we are expected to for the county, that the town should really pick one location at a time and focus on each of those locations rather than getting funded for 13 of these locations and trying to do them all at once.
Right. I would add on the topic that Carol brought up and Vika touched on, the Governor Mills called an emergency meeting of the Maine Climate Council that happened yesterday afternoon. And the meeting focused on a panel of 12 or 13 department heads from throughout the state. And from memory, I'm going to say that the head of the DEP and the head of the Maine Geologic Survey, in addition to several other authorities, including, I believe, both MEMA and I think even FEMA, referred to the fact that the current not FEMA and MEMA, but rather legislators from the state and representatives from our federal legislators all spoke to the point that current legislation says what FEMA can offer is bringing things back to where they were, and how that's becoming a bit of a ludicrous reference point because it makes no sense to repair public infrastructure back to a point where it just failed with a weather event, but that rather legislation needs to deal with the fact that we should be repairing to something that's more defensible in the future. I think that's a critical point going forward. So what FEMA can currently do is recognized by many to be perhaps less than appropriate given the current situation at hand, that we should be repairing back to something better than what we had given the situation we're faced with sea level rise and storm severity. Anything else that we want to see in terms of slides from Maya, Carol, Vika? I think those give a good example of the process that we're involved in with documentation and just a bit of reference as to what we're looking at going forward.
Should I show the stone wharf pictures?
Sure, that'd be great.
So clearly there is a lot of water. Um, yeah. This is what I have in the after folder for those.
So if you go back a couple photos for folks, a key point of reference here is not just that the stone pier is underwater, but look at the angle of the ramp that we normally walk down to get onto the islander. In this case, you're walking up the ramp to get to the float that is tied to the islander. And obviously the float being underwater is a concern as well. I'm sorry, the pier being underwater is a concern. And then if you would go forward one, Maya. So what we're looking at right here is the golf tee, but in particular in the center of the photo, that is the boat ramp and barge ramp being totally underwater. And EMA and FEMA encouraged us to include damages to that, which is an older, the strips of concrete that comprise that ramp are older, but they encouraged us to include that in our estimates. Thanks, Maya. Ralph.
One thing for everybody to consider is that's our access for fire and EMS if we have a big fire, getting more personnel over. But the more common thing is getting patients off the island. That's how we're going to be going. So at high tide, it would have been a little more difficult.
Yep. And then, thank you, Ralph. I think that's very appropriate to mention. It's easy to think about functionality in terms of storms in the standpoint of, well, folks aren't going to be going down to get on their skiff, for example, to go to town during a major storm event. Rescue is different. Rescue is clearly different. We have to be able to operate rescue regardless. And just imagine the rescue crew trying to get a stretcher across that pier, through that water, up that ramp in an emergency situation. It's terrifying. And then I believe Mitch had his hand up. Mitch, you're muted. Still can't hear you. Vika, are you able to unmute Mitch from your control panel?
How's that?
There you go. Okay, we can hear you now. Mitch, go ahead.
Just a thought, and I concur that FEMA is behind the times based on the growth of sea level and the future damages that will occur. So I'm wondering if a strategy might be that we have to go through, as you've pointed out, all of the necessary steps to determine engineering costs to replace in kind, establish what that dollar amount is, and get the monies held for us. And then with the approval of the public at town meeting, say their actual repair will then be X amount of dollars more on top of that, but FEMA will only do up to a certain level to get it back to where it was. And at that point, it may help start a foundation of dollars, if you will, to start meeting the rise in the sea level and future costs to repair and to sustain the travel routes along the shorelines.
Good point, Mitch. Thank you. And I can only see some of the pictures here. I'm looking to see if anybody else has their hand raised, not seeing any. All right, so there's one other point that I wanted to make is that as we enter into these situations, we're learning where we need more help. And everybody who's been involved in analyzing all these visits, putting the data together, the work is highly appreciated. And also it's beginning to look like we might need more help on some of these tasks. So a future agenda item for the select board I would like to add would be to consider in what way could we beef up our emergency management team's ability and speed of data collection and presentation in these situations. It's been a real uphill battle to get all this information to MEMA and EMA in the manner that they wanted. And certainly with FEMA, that'll grow even more. And the level of information that they're looking for has changed from the last storm to this storm. That will likely change in the future as well. So just looking at ways to stay ahead of the need to organize, collect, and present this data while we're still taking care of the business of fire safety, emergency rescue, and still taking care of all the town business that we need to take care of in terms of managing the finances of the town and those kinds of things. So that'll be a future agenda item for the select board to discuss. Any other comments from the board before we close this? Did I miss anything that we need to cover?
Well, Bob, I just thought it might be worthwhile to add for people who haven't been in the loop. For the stone pier, the estimate was on the order of 200,000. And a good portion of that, about 150, was the repaving of the stone pier was some kind of, underlayment repair. And then the other two parts were for the barge ramp repair, and then a engineering study to kind of do an inspection and evaluation of the stability of the pier, just to confirm that we haven't had any issues. So I just wanted to let people know, particularly Ralph, that, the game plan is, to do some kind of safety evaluation of the pier to confirm that it's not at risk of failure, even though we did have a study done a few years ago. I don't think these kind of events were considered in that study. The exposure of the pier fortunately protected us from significant damage, but even so, it's worthwhile to probably complete that review. So that's in the plans and in the works to kind of happen.
Yep. Now we just add to that the prior stability study. We've looked at what those survey points were, those fixed points in space that tell us where the stone pier is. And we've come, with help from engineering, we've come to the conclusion that there are additional methods with which to measure and record those survey points to beef up our awareness of the stability of the current structure, given the change in these events. So thanks, Carol. Anything else, Vika, that we need to cover that you can think of?
No, just once I hear back and have a date, we will let you know.
Okay. All right. I want to thank Herb for jumping on this call so quickly. Ralph, who's just coming off of a long shift. Thank you, Ralph, for all that you do for us from an emergency management standpoint. Thank you, Maya. And thanks to Vika for all the work you've done. And we will talk again soon. So,
excuse me, Bob. I think Bill, I think Maya said Bill wanted to say something.
Okay. So Vika's going to promote Bill to panelist so Bill can speak. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, so I think we've got to stop screen sharing, because without screen sharing, I can't see the other. There we go. All right.
Okay, am I there?
You are now here, Bill. We can hear you.
Just that yesterday we learned about a tide gauge that's installed on the stone wharf, and apparently it was done by the dredging people. We're just curious about the fact that it's there. We'd sort of like to get their data and wonder if we might be able to ask them to make a donation of that tide gauge to us. And it'd be, Carol, maybe you can speak a little more about, what the options are as you see them.
Yeah, so my suspicion is that this was installed actually for the bathymetric survey. So it wasn't actually Proc that installed it, but their subcontractor. So if it would be okay with, you folks, I think the climate action team would like to contact them and see if, number one, they would at least share the storm event with us, assuming the instrument is still working. And then the second is, maybe they would give it to us or sell it to us. I suspect we might have paid for it as part of the whole contract. So I think it's worth a request, and it would be really handy to have, as most of we have installed, or Bill has installed, a tide gauge on the Chandler's Pier. And it would be great to have one on the other side of the island on the Stone Pier.
Vika, you see any problem with that request going forward from the climate action team? Okay, board members who are on the call, any objections or red flags you guys see? Okay, let's do it.
Okay, thanks.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank
Bill,
you.
for remembering. I totally forgot.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
All right, any other topics to cover? All right. With that, I want to thank everybody for jumping on this call so quickly and for all the work that's been done, and for all the work that's in front of us still to be done. So close the meeting. Vika, did you have something?
Yeah, can we just get a motion to adjourn so then we're
you.
official?
Yeah. Thank you. David,
I move to adjourn our meeting.
second by Carol. Discussion. All in favor, please raise your hand. Unanimous. Thanks for reminding us of that, Vika. Given my name's Robert, I should remember those things, but I forgot. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Have a
Thanks.
good day. Thank you.
See ya.